So welcome everyone to another one of our Tomorrow's Transactions webinars. And this time, this is a pre-recorded session, so there isn't an opportunity to obviously ask live questions. But if you have something that you'd like to put to either the team from Consult Hyperion or the team at DIGISEQ, we're very happy to facilitate that. So this time we're actually talking about PSD2, but in the context of wearables. And wearables, they've been around for such a long time, and companies such as DIGISEQ have done a great job at raising the profile and working with partners that will enable use cases where wearables are going to be really popular. And, we spoke as technology folk, we spoke about using mobile phones for everything, and actually there are cases when just a wearable will suffice and is actually preferred from a user's perspective. So Dave is going to moderate the session. We're joined by Tim from Consult Hyperion, obviously, and Angela and Colin from DIGISEQ. So welcome everyone. Dave, I'll hand over to you, and I look forward to listening.
Thanks, Claire. And I should begin by saying I probably, when there's like a big game like Man City, Real Madrid, people have those scarves that are like half Man City and half Real Madrid. Like, I feel like I should have one of, because I'm rather privileged to be in the position of being not only the global ambassador for Consult Hyperion, but I'm also the non-executive chairman of DIGISEQ. So I'm, although I'm not on the screen, but I am literally sitting in the middle of all of these fantastic people, which is a privilege to be completely honest. So so the issue is this: the wearables are gaining attention, growing in use. I mean, certainly in my house, my wife's default mechanism of payment is her keyring, which is mapped to a John Lewis MasterCard. I have a ring which I use when I go out at lunch times, not because we've never heard of Apple Pay, but because basically we just can't be bothered to either take the phone or get the phone out and use it, and so on. So while wearables are becoming more widely used in a lot of different contexts, the issue of security is obviously central to the design of an effective solution. And it's with that in mind that DIGISEQ wanted to help their customers understand why the service is secure, in fact, why it's more secure in some circumstances than other solutions. And because Consult Hyperion are the leading experts on this kind of thing, it was natural to commission them to look into it in some detail. So that's how all of this came about. So let's start by just opening up the problem space a little bit, and I'll go straight to Colin with the sort of problem formulation, which is, if I take my watch, hat, badge, key ring, I mean, whatever it else is, I've got my chip in, and I tap it, and off I go. What is the underlying security in all of that? What's actually happening under the hood to make sure that this is secure?
So basically, it's exactly the same as tapping your card. The technology we use is identical to what is built into your regular credit and debit card. We have the added security of typically it's now might be attached to you as opposed to being in your wallet. So that hence a wearable. So actually it's in many ways more secure than a card. So because you're less likely to use it.
Okay, well, but suppose I'm down the pub and somebody sees me pay with my ring, or actually in the fish and chip shop more likely, and then they do some sort of David Blaine kind of stunt and manage to get the ring off and make off. Well, actually, if I noticed the ring was missing, I just use the phone to turn it off, but whatever. But I mean, what other security mechanisms are there?
Well, that's exactly what PSD2 was introduced for, because you have to authenticate on a reasonably regular basis that you are still the legitimate holder of that payment device. And typically that requires either other information or another device. So if someone steals your ring, they're very limited in what they can do.
Does PSD2 still apply to us? Wasn't this something to do with Europe?
It still does. It's across Europe particularly, but that does include the UK in this case. Other countries such as the US have not implemented it, although if you take a European product to the US, it still does apply.
Right. So, Tim, can you just help me through this a little bit? So what specifically does PSD2 say that applies to wearables?
So what PSD2 says is that when you do an electronic payment, you've got to do something called Strong Customer Authentication, which is a form of two-factor authentication. And it's two factors out of possession, knowledge, and inherence, aka a biometric. And you have to do that on every payment where a so-called exemption doesn't apply. So there are exemptions, and in this case, the main exemptions are basically when you do a contactless payment, you only have to do SCA once every 5th transaction, or once every, roughly speaking, every 150 euros. There are differences between countries, and particularly between the UK and the rest of Europe, but it's only on the amount of value you can actually transact before you have to do it. And that applies as much to a wearable as it does to a card or a phone. It doesn't make any difference.
So when I'm in the pub, every 5 times I use my ring, I would then have to do what?
SCA.
Which means actually entering a PIN or something, or what?
Yeah, or something.
Then
yeah, because
that's bill to somebody. What exactly does this mean?
Well, your wearable is a factor, okay? So you are in possession of the factor, so that is one factor, but you're going to have to come up with a way of basically introducing a second factor. So either you're going to have to use some kind of biometric, or you're going to have to use some kind of PIN. And I know what you're going to say. This is a passive device. How are you going to do that? Yeah, that's the problem. And that's what this paper that we've put together for DIGISEQ is largely about. It's about what does that all mean? How do you do it? And ultimately, why is it simple, especially the way that DIGISEQ do it?
So when I'm down the pub, or I don't know, I'm on the beach buying ice creams with my wristband or whatever might be going on, once every, in the UK, it's like 300 euros, I think is the limit. So once every 300 euros or so, I'll be asked to authenticate myself. And how will I do that, Colin?
You'll do that either with online PIN or by using your mobile phone to authenticate.
I have to go back and get the phone to authenticate. But most of the big merchants here in the UK, at least, have already implemented online PIN, haven't they?
Yeah. Basically, most of the big merchants have. UK and Ireland are the only countries in Europe without a mandate to do online PIN. But because of contactless, okay, because if you're doing contactless payments, you don't want people inserting their card, everybody's moving towards it. So, yeah, the large retailers all moving to online PIN.
Just to quickly add to that, actually, it is important to state that the PIN is the PIN of the original card. So we are adopting that same PIN just from a consumer experience perspective. They don't have to remember yet another PIN. It is on the card that the token has been created from.
Okay, so if we just walk through the process of this now. So I've got my, let's use keyring as the example because that's an easy example. So I've got my Manchester City keyring. It's got the EMV chip in it. It's been loaded with a MasterCard token, let's say from my Curve card. I've used my Curve card to map it to, let's say, my John Lewis MasterCard. Now I walk around buying things with my keyring. Effectively, I'm buying them with my John Lewis MasterCard. And every now and then I'll be asked to enter the PIN in the terminal.
Yes.
So actually there's nothing. So just to be clear then, because this is what I took from the paper, just to be clear, there's nothing in PSD2 SCA which actually holds back the evolution of this sector.
No, not at all. The challenge in some cases is some issuers don't want to do this themselves. Okay, and that's where they need a delegated solution. But that's a different thing. That's where basically we're supporting the issuers to do, implement easily rather than have them having to do it themselves.
So in this delegated approach, Colin, I mean, when you say delegated SCA, why was it delegated? Why didn't the banks just implement it?
Well, many banks have a lot of things they're doing at the moment, and it was just the time it was going to take them to implement the solution. So delegation was used by many banks in the beginning, but now, PSD2 has been with us several years, and they're moving, their systems are now being fully implemented to support it directly.
So Angela, so for issuers that don't have SCA in place, if they delegate it to DIGISEQ, what I mean, that works. What does it mean in practice?
It means that the authentication would actually be out of scope. So it would be via the DIGISEQ mobile app, as opposed to it being via an online PIN. So it isn't generally the recommended route that we would certainly propose to our issuer partners, because it doesn't really give the best consumer experience. The best consumer experience is what they're familiar with and already working with on a day-to-day basis with their cards.
Yeah, no, I realize it's not the best experience. I just wanted to get it clear in my head that it all works. That's the main
Absolutely,
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so just putting it together, what we've got so far then. So we have lots of interesting kinds of wearables coming into the market. Obviously, DIGISEQ is the best way of doing it because of remote personalization, which other people can't do. There is nothing in PSD2 and SCA that is going to stop this market from growing in any way. Most of the issuers have implemented online PIN. Most of the merchants have issued online PIN. Most of the banks handle SCA properly. But if there's some that don't, we have a delegated SCA solution that works for them. So putting all that together, then, can I just ask, what do you see, from the customer perspective? What do you see as the key recommendations from? I mean, people can download the paper and read it themselves, but just as a summary, what do you see as the key recommendations?
So from the customer perspective, really, we want to replicate as much as possible as their experience with cards. So we would recommend that the issuer follows their own SCA solution, which would ultimately enable online PIN in most scenarios where that limit has been reached. We would recommend a backup solution where possible. We know there are some countries still where perhaps online PIN is not as widely accepted, or there are some terminals such as vending machines, unattended parking terminals that perhaps don't have the same exemptions as transit. So the backup solution being that out of scope on app, on the banking mobile app authentication, where they can just log on and authenticate themselves via the biometric solution, no doubt, or through the passcode to say they are still here and the wearable is still being used. So that's a very positive experience. And that's also been covered, I believe, in the white paper within our recommendations at the very end, really summarising everything.
Fantastic. Actually, can I just, Tim, just out of curiosity, because I know you do SCA analysis in some other areas as well. I mean, I'm just curious about Colin's point, because Colin said this has been around for several years now, which it has. So how come we still have so much PSD2 SCA work?
It's because of the wide variety of use cases. So initially, people were just focused on the retail experience and e-commerce. But because there are such a wide variety of situations in which this applies, wearables is just another dimension to that. But these edge cases now are coming into the mainstream, and those things that Angela just mentioned, the unattended transit devices where transit exemption doesn't apply, the vending machines that don't have ability to enter a PIN, those are now being brought in. And to be frank, for a while the regulators have kind of ignored those because they're too difficult. They've stopped that. Those are now being brought into the mainstream along with everything else. So that's why we keep on seeing this stuff, just flowing away, because there's so many different situations in which SCA actually applies, and people are only just getting around to dealing with some.
Okay, so given that the white paper shows that not only are there no barriers, but in fact, PSD2 SCA actually rather helps us to sort of grow this market. Where do we go next with that, Angela?
Well, we're looking to grow the wearable market, and really you talk about barriers. One of the barriers within that growth was around education. So we were very keen to educate the our own industry colleagues in how wearables work in the real world, and actually, you know, just once again reiterate that we are following and adopting the same SCA that cards are using, and what that really means for the consumers, and actually how familiar that experience will be for the consumers, so that they can really feel trust and secure in that transaction, but actually still delivering the real consumer choice and the real innovation that wearables can provide. So we hope that the issuers themselves will read this and feel that actually this is definitely a scalable solution that they can offer to their own consumers, with that inherent trust that we are doing it in the right way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Angela. And rest assured, we'll do what we can to make sure all the right people read the white paper as well. So thank you for choosing Consult Hyperion. Tim, Colin, fantastic. Thank you so much for your honest and open answers as always. Really appreciate it. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, really interesting topic. And Angela, I think you hit the nail on the head at the end when you're talking about the simplicity and the education part that's needed for people. You know, these aren't some mystical things. They work exactly as they should do with the security that supports them. So thank you ever so much for participating in this webinar. And for those viewers who haven't yet seen the white paper, you can either click the link through on Consult Hyperion's page, or you can go to the DIGISEQ site and you'll be able to download a copy to read at your leisure. So thanks ever so much, everyone.